There are questions that simply seek information, and then there are questions that reveal the condition of the human heart. On a warm day in ancient Judea, as crowds gathered around Jesus to hear his teaching, one respected teacher of the law stepped forward. He was a man admired for his knowledge of Scripture, confident in his understanding of God's commands. Yet beneath his confidence was a desire to test the one standing before him. Looking directly at Jesus, he asked, "Teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" The crowd fell silent. Every eye turned toward Jesus, wondering how he would answer such an important question. Instead of responding immediately, Jesus gently asked, "What is written in the law? How do you read it?" The teacher answered without hesitation, "You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." Jesus smiled warmly. "You have answered correctly," he said. "Do this, and you will live." For a moment, it seemed the conversation had ended. But the teacher wanted something more. Hoping to justify himself, he asked another question. "And who is my neighbor?" It was a simple question. Yet its answer would challenge centuries of prejudice, tradition, and human thinking. Rather than giving a definition, Jesus began to tell a story. A story that would echo through generations. A story that still speaks to every heart today. A certain man, Jesus began, was traveling from Jerusalem to Jericho. The road between those two cities was beautiful, but dangerous. It twisted through steep rocky hills and narrow valleys where thieves often waited in silence, watching travelers pass alone. The man walked with purpose, unaware that hidden eyes followed his every step. The warm desert breeze whispered through the stones. Everything seemed peaceful. Until suddenly, figures burst from behind the rocks. Robbers surrounded him before he could escape. They struck without mercy. They tore away his belongings. They beat him until every ounce of strength disappeared. When they had taken everything they wanted, they left him lying beside the road. Bleeding. Broken. And barely alive. Dust settled around his motionless body. The footsteps of the robbers faded into the distance. Silence returned. The traveler struggled to breathe. Every movement brought unbearable pain. His vision blurred beneath the scorching sun. Alone. Helpless. Far from home. He wondered if anyone would ever come. Or if this lonely road would become the place where his journey ended forever. Time passed slowly. The traveler drifted in and out of consciousness. Then, in the distance, footsteps. Hope flickered once again. A priest was walking down the same road. Surely this man, a servant of God, would stop. Surely compassion would overcome convenience. The wounded traveler gathered what little strength remained. He lifted his head. He reached out his trembling hand. But the priest saw him. And hesitated. Perhaps he feared danger. Perhaps he worried the robbers were still nearby. Perhaps he convinced himself someone else would help. Whatever his reason, he chose not to stop. Instead, he crossed to the other side of the road. Step by step, he walked farther away. Without speaking. Without looking back. The traveler watched as his last glimpse of hope disappeared into the distance. His heart grew heavier than his wounds. If even a priest would not help, who would? The desert became quiet once more. Only the wind remained. But the story was far from over. Because someone else was already making his way down that same lonely road. And no one listening to Jesus could have imagined who that person would be. The hot desert wind continued to sweep across the lonely road. The wounded traveler lay motionless, his strength fading with every passing moment. His body ached from the brutal attack, and his hope was slipping away just as quickly as the daylight. Then, he heard footsteps again. This time, a Levite approached. The Levites were respected men who served in the temple. They knew the scriptures. They understood God's commandments. If anyone recognized the importance of mercy, surely it would be someone like him. The traveler forced open his tired eyes. The Levite slowed his pace. He noticed the injured man lying beside the road. For a brief moment, it seemed he might stop. The wounded traveler held his breath. But after only a quick glance, the Levite continued walking. Step by step, he disappeared down the road, leaving the injured man exactly where he had found him. The silence felt heavier than ever. 2 men. 2 opportunities. 2 disappointments. The traveler no longer expected anyone to help. He closed his eyes. Perhaps this was where his story would end. But sometimes, when hope seems completely lost, God is already sending help from the most unexpected place. Far in the distance, another traveler appeared. He rode slowly along the winding road on a grey donkey, carrying supplies for his journey. As he drew closer, Jesus revealed something that would have shocked everyone listening. The traveler was a Samaritan. A quiet murmur spread through the crowd. In those days, Jews and Samaritans shared a long history of hostility and mistrust. Many avoided one another whenever possible. No one expected a Samaritan to become the hero of this story. Yet when the Samaritan saw the wounded man lying in the dust, he didn't see an enemy. He didn't see someone from another nation. He didn't see someone who was different. He simply saw a human being in desperate need. His heart filled with compassion. Without hesitation, he stopped his donkey and hurried to the injured traveler. He knelt beside him. The wounded man slowly opened his eyes. Instead of seeing another person walking away, he saw kindness, gentleness, mercy. Perhaps for the first time since the attack, he felt safe. Sometimes the greatest acts of love come from the people we least expect. And sometimes, the person we have been taught to avoid becomes the very one God uses to change our lives. The Samaritan wasted no time. Carefully opening his travel bag, he removed small containers of oil and wine. With gentle hands, he cleaned the man's wounds, easing his pain as best he could. Every movement was patient. Every touch was filled with compassion. Then he wrapped clean bandages around the traveler's injuries, protecting them from dirt and infection. The wounded man watched in amazement. This stranger owed him nothing. Yet he cared for him as though they had been lifelong friends. When the bandages were secure, the Samaritan carefully helped the injured traveler to his feet. The man could barely stand. So the Samaritan lifted him onto his own donkey. Rather than riding comfortably himself, he chose to walk beside the animal, guiding it slowly along the rocky road. Each careful step brought them closer to safety. The journey was long. The road remained difficult. But the Samaritan never complained. He stayed beside the wounded man the entire way, making sure he was comfortable and protected. True compassion is more than feeling sorry for someone. It is choosing to act. It is sacrificing your own comfort so another person can find hope. As the sun slowly began to set over the hills of Judea, the 2 travelers continued toward the nearest inn. The most beautiful part of this story was only just beginning. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared beyond the hills, the Good Samaritan finally arrived at a small roadside inn. Without hesitation, he gently helped the injured traveler down from the donkey and guided him inside. The innkeeper quickly prepared a room. There, the Samaritan carefully laid the wounded man on a simple bed, making sure he was as comfortable as possible. But his kindness did not end there. Throughout the night, he remained by the traveler's side. He offered him fresh water. He checked his bandages. He comforted him with gentle words. Every act spoke the same message. You are not alone. The wounded traveler, who only hours before believed he would die beside a lonely road, now found himself surrounded by unexpected compassion. A complete stranger had become his protector. Not because he was asked. Not because he expected a reward. But because love chooses to act. Outside, the night grew quiet. The stars filled the sky over Judea. Inside the little inn, one man rested peacefully, because another man had chosen mercy over convenience. Morning arrived, bringing with it the warm light of a new day. The traveler was beginning to recover, but he was still too weak to continue his journey. The Good Samaritan knew he had responsibilities waiting for him elsewhere. Yet before leaving, he made one final act of generosity. He reached into his money pouch and placed 2 silver coins into the innkeeper's hands. Looking him in the eyes, he said, "Take care of him. And if you spend more than this, I will repay you when I return." Then he quietly prepared to leave. No celebration. No recognition. No applause. He simply climbed onto his donkey and continued his journey. The wounded traveler watched from the doorway of the inn, his heart overflowing with gratitude. The Samaritan had given his time, his strength, his supplies, his money, and most importantly, his compassion. True kindness doesn't stop when it becomes inconvenient. It continues until healing begins. The story came to an end. The crowd stood in thoughtful silence. Jesus turned toward the teacher of the law, the man who had first asked, "Who is my neighbor?" Then Jesus asked a question of his own. "Which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers?" The answer had become impossible to ignore. The teacher quietly replied, "The one who showed him mercy." Jesus looked at him with kindness and said, "Go and do likewise." In that single sentence, Jesus transformed the meaning of being a neighbor. A neighbor was not simply someone who lived nearby. Not someone who shared the same background. Not someone who looked the same. A neighbor was anyone in need. And love was measured, not by words, but by action. More than 2,000 years have passed since Jesus shared this remarkable story. Empires have risen and fallen. Cities have changed. Generations have come and gone. Yet the message of the Good Samaritan remains as powerful today as it was on that day in Judea. Every day, people around us carry invisible wounds. Some are hurting physically. Others are weighed down by loneliness, fear, grief, disappointment, or despair. We may never walk the rocky road between Jerusalem and Jericho, but we encounter opportunities every day to show mercy. Sometimes kindness is as simple as stopping to listen. Sometimes it means offering a helping hand. Sometimes it means forgiving someone who has hurt us. And sometimes it means loving people who are different from us. Jesus reminds us that compassion has no boundaries. It crosses cultures. It overcomes prejudice. It reaches beyond fear. It sees every person as someone created and deeply loved by God. The question is no longer, "Who is my neighbor?" The question is, will I choose to be a neighbor? May we have hearts that notice those who are hurting. May we have courage to stop when others walk away. And may our lives reflect the same mercy that the Good Samaritan showed on that lonely road. Because when kindness becomes our way of life, the world becomes a brighter place. Thank you for joining us on this journey through one of Jesus' most beloved parables. If this story encouraged you, inspired you, or reminded you of the power of compassion, share it with someone who needs hope today. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of kindness can become the greatest miracle in another person's life. Before we end, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever experienced kindness from a complete stranger or had the opportunity to help someone in need? Share your story in the comments below, we'd love to read it. If this retelling of the Good Samaritan encouraged your heart, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next Bible story brought to life through cinematic storytelling. And if you know someone who could use a reminder that compassion can change lives, share this video with them today. Thank you for watching, and until next time, may God bless you, guide your steps, and fill your heart with His love and mercy.